Senator Fawcett.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I am grateful for the opportunity to rise directly after Senator Billick and her contribution, because it just highlights the very political nature of this MPI, and the fact that so many things in Australia that are important, whether that be health or defence or other things, are completely reduced to slogans from the opposition and, importantly, a complete lack of fact. Let me just take a couple of things that were just mentioned. There was a claim there that the Abbott government had done all it could to drive shipbuilding offshore. Mr Acting Deputy President, the Australian people know by now, because it's been in the media so much, that the reason we are facing the valley of death is that because the Labor Party in 6 years of government signed no contracts to start building ships. Now, Senator Gallagher, who I have great respect for, colleague from South Australia, sighs there, but he needs to own up to the fact that his side of politics made no commitments for new shipbuilding jobs. They've even come out with the farcical excuse that the reason they didn't need to sign any contracts was that shipyards were working at capacity under Labor. Well, guess who commissioned those projects? They were commissioned by the Howard government, and what Defence has consistently said is that if we were to avoid the valley of death, decisions would have had to have been made in the 2011-12 timeframe. That was under the Labor government. So for them to come here and make that claim, particularly only a month after this government has made an announcement of $89 billion for naval shipbuilding programs, including bringing forward the offshore patrol vessels and future frigates to have a continuous build, which is something that people have been calling for well over a decade in this country, you can see that those claims are purely political and not based on any fact. The second claim that was made just then in that contribution was that the Abbott government cut funding to health. Now, that's been a line that has been run by the Labor Party ever since the election, but if you look at the facts, and I bring here facts for South Australia, which is my state, in 2013-14 hospital services funding was $983.3 million and public health funding was $23.1 million, so a total of just over $1 billion coming from the federal government. In the 14-15 budget, it was $1.053 for hospital services and $24.3 million for public health, so $1.07 billion. Going through the forward estimates, by 2017-18, the figure is $2.188 billion. So the facts completely undermine the political argument that the ALP is running with these claims that they are making. Now, the Australian public know that a number of the promises made by this government have been delivered and delivered effectively, and we need to look no further than things like abolishing the carbon tax. Okay? We not only said we would abolish the carbon tax, but we said that we would have a scheme to reduce emissions that would be more effective. And so, when we look at the first of the Emissions Reduction Fund auctions, what we saw was that 47 million tonnes of abatement have been achieved at an average price of around $13.95. So let's compare that with the carbon tax. At most, modelling shows it helped reduce emissions by less than 12 million tonnes, but it cost $15.4 billion. And that means it's around $1,300 per tonne, in effect. So some 93 times more expensive, and it had the impact on not only households, and that's been calculated at just over $550 on average per household, but importantly, it had a huge impact on the viability of our manufacturing industry, which goes to the heart of job opportunities for young Australians, and particularly in a state like South Australia. So not only has this government followed through with its promise to get rid of the carbon tax, but it has made good on its commitment to put in place a scheme that will provide more emissions abatement at a better price, without having those negative impacts on the economy. We've also seen the promise of getting control of our borders. And not only has that had the benefit of stopping the people smuggling business, preventing people from drowning at sea, yes, there are the cost savings, but the human element to it. The human element to it. One of the things that people constantly talk to me about when it comes to border protection is they say, we don't like the thought of children being in detention. Well, can I tell you that when the Howard government left office, there were no children in detention. But under the policies of the ALP, which threw open our borders, there were over 1,900 children in detention in July of 2013. Within a year and a half of this government coming to office and putting in place our border protection policies, not only did we regain control of the borders, break the people smuggling model, but we have reduced the number of children in detention down into the low hundreds. Okay? That is a fantastic outcome from a humanitarian perspective. And so for those people who say that this government made promises and has been chaotic, I just ask them to look at some of the signature policies. The last area that I'll talk about is defence. Okay, the Secretary of Defence made the comment that under the last government, not only did the goalposts move, but they were torn down and burnt, used for firewood because of the budgetary damage done to the Defence Department. Well, this government has put us back on a track to achieving 2% over the decade. We have started to stabilise the management of defence with the First Principles Review. We've made the commitment I talked about before for the sustainable shipbuilding. And so on those issues that are important to Australians, the economy, national defence, things like our environment, this government has followed through with its promises and good management to achieve real outcomes that impact Australians.
Thank you, Senator Fawcett. Senator